экономику, а также за темы, волнующие россиян за границей. А еще за культуру, интернет и технологии. Сегодня...
Okay, so would you look at that new event, apparently. But also I just realized
I sent someone's papers. Miss Cecilia picked this out for me.
this. Replace, enhance.
Last week, an historic climate conference concluded, and you need to know about it. In this video, we're going to talk about what this conference was, how we got here, what was agreed at the conference, and what's going to happen next. And this is an unusual video for me because I've not got a fully worked out script. I've just got a research document in front of me. I've basically pulled together all the resources I could find as quickly as possible after the conference finished so we can get this video to you. So it's a bit of a lottery about how much sense it's going to make.
I'll be fine.
This is Santa Marta, a beautiful looking city in Colombia, and I've regrettably yet to go. I didn't go to this conference, but it was the home of the first international conference on the phase out of fossil fuels. Now you may well say, I thought that was what COP was? Well, not exactly. COP, which stands for Conference of the Parties, is the United Nations conference series on how we limit the impacts of climate change, which in practical terms means bringing down our greenhouse gas emissions. And we just had the 30th iteration of this, which was in Belém in Brazil, and to say it's had a potted history would be generous. The first one happened back in 1995 in Berlin, and it took 2 more conferences for the actual first significant agreement to happen on the need to bring down greenhouse gas emissions. That happened in 1997 in Kyoto. It was the Kyoto Agreement, which introduced this idea of shared but differentiated responsibilities. This idea that everybody needs to bring down their greenhouse gas emissions. Some countries are in a better position to do so now, which was great, big deal. But it kind of was the only big deal to come out of COP until 2015. Because at COP21, we got the Paris Agreement, and after the year 2020, an agreement for how the world should be phasing out its fossil fuels. And that has been really quite effective. In the 10 years before the Paris Agreement, year on year, global emissions grew on average by 1.7%. And in the 10 years after the Paris Agreement, they did continue to rise, but by 0.32% year on year. The Paris Agreement was quite a clear demarcation. However, that's obviously not good enough. We don't need emissions to plateau, we need them to fall. And at subsequent COPs, not very much added to the Paris Agreement. At COP26 in Glasgow, we had some progress being made. For the first time, the phase down of coal was mentioned in the final text. And then at COP28 in Dubai, of all places, the phase out of fossil fuels was mentioned in the final text for the first time. And that final text is the key point here. It is the strength and the weakness of the COP format. The final text is the document that gets released at the end of the conference that everybody at the conference agreed to everything in. And that's a really powerful document because everybody after the fact can point to every bullet point and say, we all agreed on this. So, we've got to do something. Powerful but limited, because while the vast majority of countries around the world know that climate change is real, already feeling its effects, and wants to phase out fossil fuels to bring down our greenhouse gas emissions, a small number of countries vastly benefit from their sale. Of course, I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the United States, but also countries like China. And it just takes one of those countries to say in negotiations, no, we're not happy with that bullet point, please change it, for progress to come to a grinding halt. And that's basically what's happened over the past 30 years of COPs. What's called the consensus mechanism has been its greatest strength, but also its Achilles heel. And this came to a head at COP30 in Berlin, where a couple of countries were really frustrated by this and said, right, we're going to do our own conference to do things better. And at the end of that conference, Colombia and the Netherlands said they would be co-hosting the first international phase-out conference, and they'd be inviting a coalition of the willing. That conference, of course, became Santa Marta, and it was not about should we phase out fossil fuels, it was how are we going to phase out fossil fuels. And at the time of recording, they haven't released the full outcomes from the conference. They have released a
Okay.
preliminary bunch of outcomes, and in that they specify that the aim was not to develop new targets, but how to advance and accelerate the implementation of agreed goals. And the conference was broken down into a scientific pre-conference where scientists from around the world met and basically came up with a bunch of recommendations. I'll talk about them a little bit later. Then there was a day for sub-national governments and other stakeholders, and then 2 days for the bigwigs, the climate envoys, the environment ministers, that kind of thing. And it was attended by 56 countries with additional representation from the EU, which represent over half of the world's GDP and almost a third of its energy demand, but only a fifth of its energy supply. The majority of the world's energy supply comes from countries that were pointedly not invited to the conference. More on that later. Now, sadly, I wasn't at this conference, but everything that I have read about how it was conducted, the energy of people there, and what we've seen of the outcomes, it's kind of what we all hoped would happen. It's kind of what we really wanted COPs to be all along. Both in the sense of who was there, because there was national representatives from 56 different countries, but there were also scientists present, women's groups, youth groups, indigenous groups, civil society groups. There were 2,600 civil society and community organizations taking part in this thing. But also in terms of how it was conducted. I'd like to refer you to Carbon Brief's excellent breakdown of the event. Definitely read their article for more. And they describe how the organizers at the conference broke people down into small groups. An inner circle of 12 national representatives, and then an outer circle of indigenous groups, those other stakeholders that I mentioned. And importantly, everybody was allowed to speak and everybody had to listen. And the meetings were reported on using what's called Chatham House rules, which means you could report what happened in a meeting, but you couldn't say who said it. So countries and groups were far freer to speak than they otherwise would be. And just to read you their reporting, many countries were highly complimentary of this informal format, describing it in the closing plenary as refreshing, highly successful, and a safe space for discussion. In particular, I love this quote from the Special Representative on Climate Change from Panama, who said, "I'm going to be honest, at first I was like, what the f*** am I doing here? I don't know where this is going. But then, as the workshop started, I realized there were ministers, envoys, civil society leaders, and indigenous people. They put us in a format where we could not open our computers, so we had to speak from our minds and our hearts. That completely flipped my perception. That kind of space I haven't seen in my 10-year history with the UNFCCC. It's just great. Like, not only is this conference upending the playbook of who's attending, this coalition of the willing idea, but it's also changing how the nuts and bolts of the conference work. It's great. But okay, what was actually agreed at the conference? Well, first of all, let's temper expectations. This conference was not going to solve the climate crisis on its own. You weren't going to get a date where all countries were going to stop using fossil fuels, and it wasn't going to be this legally binding thing with penalties, right? That just wasn't going to happen. You know, it took us 3 COPs to get to the Kyoto Agreement. As I already mentioned, they've published a document showing the preliminary outcomes from this conference, which I'll be showing through this video, but you can check it out down below. The first key outcome was that this is going to be an ongoing process. There's going to be another conference like this early next year, which is going to be co-hosted by Tuvalu and Ireland. But it's going to take place in Tuvalu, a country of 11,000 people, which might potentially be facing a come from away type situation where the population doubles overnight.
We got 38 planes. We got 300 people on the average. Holy shit.
I really want someone to write a musical about that one too. And you might think that is a strange pairing of countries. I certainly did, but I quite like the justification that Ireland gave. They basically said that this was a deliberate choice, picking 2 island nations from opposite sides of the planet, but they have this shared goal and keeping equity at the heart of this transition, which, yeah, I quite like. And what these ongoing conferences are going to do is provide the forum, the necessary forum, to link national climate policies with the big international stuff at COP, which doesn't really exist at the moment, which is kind of bananas. And importantly, this new forum isn't meant to replace COPs. Those are still going to happen. What this is doing is supplementing, complementing that process with the countries who are willing to actually do something all clubbing together. And specifically, they want to accomplish that through 3 conversation streams. Firstly, collaborating to build national and regional fossil fuel transition roadmaps. Now, each country is obliged to produce something called an NDC, a nationally determined contribution, which basically says we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by this much over this many years. But that's not the same thing as a roadmap. That's a target. It's not how you get there. And the point of this stream is to let countries share expertise, share plans, so that they can actually build roadmaps. I think really importantly, not just for their countries, but for entire regions. That's a big deal. Then the second stream is all about trade policies, and specifically trade in carbon-intense goods. So addressing the fact that a country like the UK, for example, might have brought down its domestic emissions by over 50% since 1990, but its overall emissions, accounting for the fact that it's importing carbon-intense stuff from elsewhere, have dropped, but not by that much. I think it's by about 25%. So this will involve conversations around mechanisms like the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism that the EU recently introduced. And then this third stream is about the black sheep of all climate negotiations, which is finance. Like, we know that transitioning to a net zero economy is the cheapest option available to us. It is cheaper than the catastrophic climate damages of not doing so. But it's still going to be expensive. Even though the individual technologies are cheaper than the fossil fuel alternatives, you're rewiring the entire global economy, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And so you're not going to make the transition happen unless people have access to the money, and you've got to do that in a way that is fair. So this stream is all about making sure people have access to the money, but that we don't trap countries in debt traps, that we don't unleash a wave of neocolonialism in the global south, and most importantly, in my opinion, this stream explicitly mentions the need to reform fossil fuel subsidies. That was like a key discussion point. And I guess, sort of overarching all those 3 streams, a key takeaway from this conference is that international cooperation around climate is alive and well. These countries are talking to each other and listening. And fortunately in 2026, that's noteworthy. And another thing that's noteworthy is that this conference really put an emphasis on evidence-based policy decisions. And this is something we also saw at COP30, that it was meant to be the COP of truth, and I think they pretty much did deliver on that. In this case, though, the fact that they preceded the high-level conference with a scientific conference, and the fact that scientists then produced briefing documents that they passed to negotiators, is really significant, because those scientists were free to make pointed recommendations, which they don't do as part of the really big organization, which is the IPCC. The IPCC's language has to be neutral. It doesn't say you should be doing this or you should be doing that. In this case, scientists were free to say, don't allow for any new fossil fuel extraction. Set ambitious near-term targets for methane emission reductions. And I mean, as far as we can tell, they were listened to. And importantly, actually, this is something that they will be doing year on year going forwards, providing pre-conference recommendations, something that is so far removed from the 7 or so year cycle of IPCC reports. This is going to be far more up to date. If you'd like to see all those recommendations, then I'll leave a link to Carbon Brief coverage of them down in the description. And then someone who was mentioned, but doubtless will not listen, was President Trump. I think President Trump is going to get a lot of credit at this conference for hastening the transition, because if I quote the final text here, preliminary final text, with 75% of the world dependent on fossil fuel imports, the current conflict in the Middle East has laid bare the urgency of moving towards more stable energy supplies. As I mentioned in my last video, this conflict is only going to steepen the slope of the transition. And thanks, Mr. President. It's almost like the fossil fuel industry got their preferred idiot in the White House and were like, we want you to change the world. And the monkey's paw just curled. Right, so that's all the stuff that is going to be happening going forwards. We've set up these conferences, we know what they are for, we know what they're going to be talking about, and we know some specifics about what they are targeting. But what happened at this conference? Well, in terms of concrete stuff that happened as a result of this conference, France has posted its phase-out plan. It definitely had done all the work for that before this conference. Just showing off, but good. Well done, France. We know that the Netherlands is now coordinating and identifying fossil fuel subsidies around the world and getting countries to report them. And we know that Colombia also has a fossil fuel phase-out plan because scientists delivered a bespoke one to Colombia at the conference and basically said, look, this is going to be expensive to begin with, yes, but by the 2040s, you are going to be saving a lot of money. And there may be more stuff that comes out in the coming days. As I said, I'm recording this very quickly, but that's all the concrete stuff that we know about. Really, again, just to set expectations, this conference was going to be about setting things up. It's going to be the next conferences that are really significant, especially considering who might be there. Because pointedly not invited to this conference were China, India, the United States, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, the 80% of the world's energy supply, fossil fuel producers. And of course, that's because this was always meant to be the coalition of the willing. It was the people at COP30 who said, we're sick of not making progress, let's just do it ourselves. And there's definitely an argument to be made that even without the consensus mechanism that, was holding things up before, and those countries were abusing that mechanism, there's something to be said for just having good faith actors in the room and setting the architecture of these conferences in that space. Some experts are saying that they probably were too cautious about not inviting countries, like Indonesia is one example that was brought up, but my gut's telling me that this was the right decision for this conference. Going forward, it's going to be very interesting to see how they expand the circle of, this isn't just people who are coming, it's people who were invited to be there. It's basically a determination of, right, how serious are you about this? But it is one thing to focus on the demand side of things, and as I said, like a third of energy demand, half the world's economy being represented at this conference. That's good, but you're not going to get anywhere just by focusing on demand. You've also got to focus on the supply. And how that process is handled and how those countries interact with these ongoing conferences, that's going to determine how historic Santa Marta was. Because yeah, it was historic. First time this had ever been done, huge step forward. Like, I really probably should stress this more. This was a breakthrough in international climate diplomacy. But how successful it was and how history will look back on its being historic will determine on the next few chapters of the story. If all the COPs so far were chapter 1 of how the world brought itself to net zero, then this might be the start of chapter 2. And it's the rest of this chapter and maybe chapter 3 that's about how countries like Saudi Arabia diversify their economies. That's going to be where the rubber meets the road and how successful this actually was. But Santa Marta was the change that we needed. It is COP reform outside of COP, and it's really exciting. All the people I know who I've spoken to about this, and it's the coverage that I've seen, there's an energy here. It's progress. It's the progress that we really need. Now, in this video, we've been talking about really high-level negotiations, and unless you're in like 0.01% of my audience, you probably can't really relate to that. But I'm sure you can relate to the feelings of anxiety, fear even, around what we are doing to this planet and what this century might look like. For me, that's most pronounced in the impact we're having on nature, because humans are very adaptable. Nature and natural systems we depend on, less so. And that's why I've been part of a community for several months now, working to protect and restore natural environments through crowdfunding specific missions. We're called Planet Wild, and so far this year we've crowdfunded restoration of peatland in Belgium, wildlife crossings in British Columbia, and connecting forest fragments in Brazil. Every mission is documented through a video on YouTube, so we can see what our contributions have achieved. And all of them have a report on the app and their website listing the objectives and the personnel, as well as one-year updates. The latest mission this month has been buying a cloud forest to grow a reserve for jaguars and other wildcats, and rewilding land that had previously been used to graze cattle in Colombia. In case you can't tell, I really like this. I mean, the individual missions are really varied and interesting, and they work with experienced partners on the ground. But more than that, I like how it's a community. Whenever you open up the app, you can explore and look at past missions and see how many people have interacted with them and how much money has been raised. And you get this impression of being in a community that's actually doing something all over the world. And if you would like to join that community of over 20,000 members, you can do so right now. In fact, the first 100 people to sign up with my code, Simon24, all caps, will get their first month paid for by me. Scan the QR code that's on screen or click the link in the description. No, I'm not kidding. I really am paying for it. You can give whatever amount per month you like. Really, every dollar does make a difference here. And in less than 30 days, you will see the result of your contribution in the app and on their excellent YouTube channel. And you can cancel anytime. Please do consider signing up and making a difference to conservation projects around the world. And if you want to see them in action, take a look at their latest mission in Colombia.
This video was made possible thanks to the support of
Okay, interesting.
Hi folks, I'm Stephen Morgan, and as a trans man, I definitely have learned quite a bit about the male experience while being a trans man and it now being my lived experience. And so that led me to make a video sharing my experience of what it's like passing. And from that video, I didn't expect it to get as much of a reach as it did. And also,
Okay, maybe later. Maybe I'm gonna watch this video later. Shapiro. I watched this video also. Timer on PS5. DLC tier list 4.3. Sure, let's
So,
go.
I want to mention that we are a Paradox affiliate, meaning that if you want to purchase your Steam keys from the Paradox Interactive Store, you can use our link down in the description or the code MON2PLAYS at the checkout to also help to support this channel. Anything purchased with our referral code, I think, gives about a 12% kickback to this channel to help support us, so thank you if you decide to do that. And I should also mention something quite important. The Utopia DLC, the Synthetic Dawn DLC, and the Humanoid Species Pack DLC are all absolutely free. They are free right now on the Steam page. You can just go and claim them, and they're going to continue being free because the developers, for the 10-year anniversary, have rolled the Utopia DLC, Synthetic Dawn, and the Humanoid Species Pack all into the base game. And that is why none of those 3 DLC will feature in this list, because you all now have access to them forever for free. Without any further ado though, let's dive in and find out about the Stellaris DLC. We're starting in the F tier. The F tier contains DLC that I honestly don't recommend overall. You could get them, or you could even just not pick them up whatsoever. If you want to complete your set, or maybe there's one specific civic or one specific trait you want access to, then perhaps yes, pick up these DLC, but otherwise it's basically a level of, if you've got everything else, why not try this? Cosmic Storms may be the most unloved DLC in the history of Stellaris. This is going to cost you $13 or your regional equivalent, and it introduces a new mechanic, Storms. At the time of recording, storms are somewhat broken. They're meant to give you some devastation on your planets, which is honestly quite annoying, but that just is not happening. They also come with a variety of bonuses that are going to make your empire a little bit stronger while the storm is present. You're going to get a new map mode to track these storms moving across the galaxy. In principle, it sounds really fun. The problem is, in my opinion, the execution. The additional map mode layer is honestly quite clunky. The additional civics are entirely reliant on storms, which are themselves not that interesting. The fact that storms influence our planet so heavily, honestly, I think is not the point of this DLC. I think it needs some love and care from the custodians, possibly to make it more about tactical scenarios and space weather to affect our ships and combat more than it is only about the economy. This is probably the only DLC I would probably recommend you don't purchase, actually, at least not at the moment. It's a lot better than when it first released, but I still think it's very, very lackluster. Then we have 3 species packs: Plantoids, Lithoids, and Aquatics. All of these are going to improve your gameplay experience. They're not like Cosmic Storms, don't worry. These species packs are going to give you a set of new portraits and also a ship set. And thanks to the work of the custodians, they all now come with additional features as well. Plantoids comes with the fewest features of any of the species packs. That's why it's probably the worst species pack in my opinion. You're going to get your hand on just 3 new species traits, 2 new civics, and that's it. Otherwise you're just getting the Plantoid species portraits, the ship set, and some city art. There are no new ascension perks, no new origins included, just 2 civics, 3 species traits. It really needs at least an extra origin to bring it in line with the rest of the species packs. Lithoids is a little bit more in depth than Plantoids. You're going to get a brand new mechanic, Lithoid Pops, which are basically rock pops that eat rocks and poop rocks and work like regular pops, except they eat rocks. Did you know that? Rocks? Thematically, I don't like Lithoids. That's why it's probably down here in the F tier.
Come on.
If you like the look of the portrait sets here, you want to try out the Lithoid mechanics,
1,
which
2, 3.
generally speaking are worse than
okay.
playing regular biopops for most builds, then pick up Lithoids. If this tickles your pickle, go for it. But for me, I honestly never really play with Lithoids and I don't really like them. Aquatic is definitely better than Plantoids. You're getting 2 origins with this species pack DLC alongside an civic, the Hydrocentric Ascension perk, which basically doubles down on the aquatic species trait that can come with this pack. The portraits are quite nice. Personally, I quite like them, and I like the ship set. However, in terms of actual content and features, there isn't that much here. You're not getting a brand new playstyle like some of the other species packs we're going to look at later, and the Ascension perk you get from this is not that interesting. I should also mention you do get the Deluge Colossus with this one, allowing you to flood planets. That's fun, granted, but it's not enough, I think, to push this up into the C tier. I think it's really important to bear in mind that the species packs are very much a matter of personal taste. If you don't like the way the species portraits or the ship sets look, you won't want to pick it up. That is almost certainly why I've rated Lithoids so low, when honestly it could possibly be C tier. If I liked the way that Lithoids looked and I played with them more often, it would definitely be C, if not possibly B tier. So there is a lot of personal preference involved when it comes to the species packs rather than the expansions in this DLC tier list. And if you think I'm a raving madman for hating Lithoids, let me know in the comments section. Go on, let me feel your wrath. Welcome to the C tier. DLC in this level have some quite honestly fun mechanics. They may even have some big gameplay impacts. However, you're either not going to use them very often, or those impacts are limited in scope, and there are, for the same price, better expansions or species packs you can pick up that will have a bigger impact on your play. Apocalypse has the best trailer of any of the Stellaris DLC trailers. What do you get in the box then? For $20, you're getting the Colossus super weapons, allowing you to build basically a Death Star and destroy planets, the Titan class ship, which is very, very effective against corvettes because it has an area of effect weapon and also has some cool auras. That is a brand new ship class. You'll also get the Marauders, which have a mid-game crisis. The Khan can rise up. And a couple of new Ascension perks and civics thrown in alongside 3 new music tracks. Overall, I don't think for $20 there are many features included in this pack.
Nice.
One new ship class that you don't necessarily need, a
Oh,
Colossus
crit
that
rate.
you won't use in every playthrough, Marauders that you might even turn off or get annoyed with when the
Sure.
Great Khan spawns, and then a few Civics and Origins really is pretty lackluster when we compare it to some of the newer DLCs that have been released at the same kind of price point. Honestly, I think the Custodian Initiative
5%
do need
less?
to come back to Apocalypse, maybe give it another Origin, or roll this one into the base game like they've done with Utopia. Nemesis is a really fun DLC. This one is very, very necessary if you want to take on the end game crisis, especially a large end game crisis, because it allows you to unlock the Galactic Custodian, and then beyond that, the Galactic Emperor within the Galactic community. Think of that as basically the Intergalactic Space Senate. You can also become the Crisis, take the player Nemesis Crisis. That's fun to do for a couple of run-throughs. The Custodian also comes with a brand new ship set, the Imperial ship set that you can play with in the game. The new
Great, very
ship set
please.
is definitely fun. On top of that, you get access to espionage. The problem with espionage is that the operations simply aren't impactful enough. You can't do enough with espionage outside of stealing some technologies, a couple of them, and stealing some pops that are really going to have much of an impact on your game. It is really boring to do, it takes a while, and the actual outcomes aren't that fun. There aren't that many items outside of becoming Custodian and becoming the Crisis and destroying the galaxy that are included in this DLC. And once you've done those, you don't really necessarily want to do them that many more times. You're not going to be playing every game becoming the Crisis unless you're some sort of masochist. And that's why I don't really think there's very much content in Nemesis. Again, like Apocalypse, I think we need to get some Origins in here, maybe some Civics, some additional bits and pieces to justify that $20 price tag. Stellaris Astral Planes basically gives us a brand new version of dig sites, and these are called Astral Rifts. Instead of digging for them within the universe, you'll jump into a little pocket dimension and explore some other universe or something like that, with apparently the smoothest balls in creation or some other such nonsense. Honestly, let's not get into that. Why is this quite low? So there's a lot of content in this one, but it is $20. You're getting access to a host of relics if you complete the Astral Rifts, and a bunch of Astral Rifts that function like dig sites. That's a lot of interesting content there. However, unlike Ancient Relics, which included dig sites and brought them into the game, this one is $20 and not $10. If this was $10, I'd put it up in A, if not S tier. But at $20, I honestly don't think it's worth it. At least not relative to the other DLC prices here. If it's on sale, which I believe it is at time of recording, it's only $10, at which point, yes, okay, but then lots of other DLC are on sale as well. For example, Ancient Relics, which will then only be $5. I don't think you can justify spending double on Astral Planes just because it's called an Astral Rift rather than a dig site. I should mention there's also some Civics and Origin that you get included with this as well. It's not just the Astral Rifts themselves. Necrophage, content-wise, feature-wise, is honestly pretty identical to Lithoids. However, the Necrophage Origin can be taken by any empire. It doesn't need to be taken by an empire that has chosen a Necroid portrait set, allowing you to play with the whole Necrophage mechanics, taking other pops and killing them or waiting until they die. That's up to you. If you want to kind of purge them and turn them into your Necroid species, fantastic. If you don't, you can just wait around until they want to ascend via death. But anyway, the Necrophage mechanics can be played by any empire. There's also some new Civics. The portrait set is really cool. We've got Jeff Portrait in here, and the ship set's really nice as well. Though, honestly, this could be interchanged with Lithoids depending on your preferences.
Jefferson.
Welcome to the B tier. DLC in this tier provide a lot of value in terms of bang for your buck. You're going to be using and reusing content in this tier over and over again in multiple playthroughs. Or alternatively, in the case of Toxoids, they've got such a damn good story with so many words in it that honestly you should just buy it to play through one of the story origins they have. I think and I hope Infernals becomes the gold standard for Stellaris Species Pack DLC. This one includes a portrait pack and some Origins, 2 Origins in fact, a host of new Civics, and on top of that, a brand new planet type, the volcanic planets, which have their own districts. That is even more flavor there. And on top of that, a brand new player crisis path, allowing you to heat up the galaxy and burn everything in it to take it back to a warmer and just all-round better past. Like any species pack, it also comes with ship sets and portraits. However, it is $3 more expensive than the rest of them. Probably overall worth it. This is going to be more bang for your buck compared to something like Plantoids or Aquatics, which, yes, they are $3 cheaper, but if you're not playing with them as much, it doesn't really matter. Overlord is a major expansion. It includes 5 new origins. It allows you to create specialist vassal types, and that will be useful in every single playthrough. There are orbital rings and hyper relays, kilo structures, smaller than mega structures, you'll be using in every single playthrough. Yes, there is a new mega structure, the Quantum Catapult, in this one, but honestly, it does kind of suck. Thank goodness then that there's even more in this DLC, 3 new enclaves. Nothing here is entirely necessary, but it's going to make your games more enjoyable and honestly easier to play. Hyper relays allow you to basically build space roads or space railways, getting your fleets around faster. Orbital rings allow you to make your planets bigger and more specialized, giving you economic bonuses. This is one of the later expansions I'd recommend you pick up when it comes to buying DLC, but I think it's still definitely a necessary one. Leviathans brings a host of Leviathans like a space dragon into the game. You'll also get access to some enclaves with this one. Enclaves like the Researcher or the Artistic Enclave are going to give you buffs to your Research or Unity. Very useful to have in the galaxy. It's also through Leviathans that we get access to the late game War in Heaven. If we have multiple fallen empires, they can awaken and start fighting each other, and a war in heaven can begin with a whole narrative chain with picking sides and then obsolescence, and it is quite fun, honestly. There are some additional portraits included in this one, some music, some new events, and encounters as well. I ummed and ahed about putting this up in the A tier. Honestly though, the Guardians, the Leviathans, I don't think you're going to run into them or use them that often. Usually you only find them and then kill them, and that's it. You know, it's a 2-minute interaction in game. The Enclaves, whilst definitely being useful, are not necessary. The War in Heaven you might not even enjoy, and it's late game content. A lot of people don't even necessarily get to the late game, and that's basically it. I think you can understand, or at least I hope you can understand, why I put this down in B tier, though I can see the argument for A tier. Grand Archive is definitely a lot of fun. You'll get access to the Grand Archive, and you'll get a host of specimens to collect and display in your Grand Archive. Each specimen is going to grant you some Empire-wide bonus. They are rather useful in terms of power, but also there is a lot of narrative and content behind each specimen. Specimens have a date of collection. They also have a big blurb, what they are, where they came from, and you usually get one at the end of an event chain or at the end of a dig site. On top of that, you'll get access to the Vivarium, where you can capture and breed wild space fauna like Tianki and Amoeba. You'll also get the Voidworm Plague, an annoying nuisance of a mid-game crisis that a lot of people turn off these days, and Cuthaloids. Cuthaloids eat your scientists while you're out exploring. They are, again, a nuisance, and a lot of people turn them off these days. There are 2 new origins. Treasure Hunters is definitely a lot of fun. Primal Calling's got some power, but it's less thematic. Then 2 new civics and 2 new tradition trees, each of these focused on either the Grand Archive or space fauna, the Vivarium. This DLC is fun. I think it's a little mispriced. I think it honestly should be $10 in terms of content. Now, it is weird with the content side of things here, because there are many specimens you can go out and collect in the galaxy with this DLC, and you're never going to find them all in one playthrough. You can find and display only 27 specimens in total, or at least display 27 at any one time. So you'll have to play again and again and again to find more and more, though there are some which crop up as very common, and they'll arrive again and again in your playthroughs. That's kind of the shame, I suppose, of RNG, is that we don't get to find a lot of the cool background items that are in this DLC. And if you're enjoying this video, please collect a specimen of that like button. Last up, we have Toxoids. Toxoids comes with 4 new traits, 3 new civics, a ship set, some species portraits, cityscapes, a fun advisor voice, and then most importantly, 2 new origins. Overtuned is mechanically
Your
really
damage
interesting.
twice.
You're trading leader lifespan in exchange for additional powerful traits that can stack alongside your normal traits right from the start of the game. But what really makes Toxoid shine is Knights of the Toxic God. This origin includes, I think, somewhere in the region of 50,000 words worth of text when it comes to narrative. There is so much narrative in Knights of the Toxic God. You definitely want to do at least 1 Knights of the Toxic God run through, maybe even 2, and explore the various narrative options that are unlocked with this DLC. Welcome to A. Items here either are filled to the brim with content, or alternatively, they provide content that will be used again and again and again in every single one of your games. In my opinion, Federations does pretty much the same things as Apocalypse, it just does it better. You will unlock more laws available to the galactic community. You will expand Federations to unlock 6 powerful Federation types, basically trade, military, hegemony, which is authoritarian, the regular one, research, and spiritual, which is unity. You'll also unlock a host of new origins like Void Dweller and Tree of Life, and get access to a brand new ship class, the Juggernaut, which is a mobile spaceport, basically a space dock that allows you to build ships on the fly. And if that wasn't enough, a brand new mega structure, the Mega Shipyard. Mega Shipyards allow you to build up to 20 ships at once and give you massive increases empire-wide to your ship build speed. The Federation mechanics are really useful and really important if you want to play a diplomacy game. If you want to RP as the Federation from Star Trek, for example, you'll want the Federation's DLC. Galactic Paragons massively expands the role leaders take in your empire. Without Galactic Paragons, leaders are good, they'll still level up and get better, but with Paragons, you will be able to specifically choose which bonuses your leaders will get. You'll get access to more bonuses. I think Specialist Veteran classes are only unlockable with Galactic Paragons. When you get to level 8, you will get access to Manifest Destiny traits, and those are pretty much the best leader traits in the game. You'll also get access to more in-depth council mechanics. Council mechanics are essential to maximizing your empire, and I think they're really necessary for fun roleplay. Choosing the leaders of your nation by putting them on the council, giving them various roles like Minister of State, Minister of Defense, the Prime Minister, that has a lot of roleplay potential. On top of that, you can attract renowned paragons based on your ethics, and there are some legendary paragons. Now, the Psionic legendary paragon, I have never actually seen in-game, so I'm not even sure if it really is there. The weight of rolling it is so fantastically low that I'm not sure it exists. Maybe it's broken. They also have Chaodes, another legendary paragon who's basically space Superman. Now, I know Superman is from space, but this is someone who's from space and ends up in space. But otherwise, their plot is basically the plot of Superman. And there are even more included here. You also get the Under One Rule Origin. That's a lot of fun. A bunch of new civics. But if you like playing as hive minds, if you like playing as Gestalt Consciousness empires, this DLC is probably F tier. If you don't like playing as regular biological empires, there is almost no point in Galactic Paragons for you. Yes, you'll be able to choose your traits, but you are not really getting an upgrade compared to the base game. You don't get access to the Destiny traits, you don't get access to the ethics-aligned renowned paragons. It's just a story of lack of access. Megacorp is $20, though honestly, I kind of feel this should be included in the base game. You get a lot for your $20. You'll get access to the Megacorp Government Authority alongside a host of brand new civics. I think it's something like 30 at least new civics added in with this one DLC. You'll also get access to Ecumenopolis worlds. Think city planets like Coruscant from Star Wars or Trantor from the Foundation. Mechanically, these are really fun because they are a great option in the mid to late game for upgrading your worlds. They're also the most powerful world type in the game, giving you a host of bonuses and allowing you to stack more pops than ever before onto a single location. Caravaneer fleets are included in this game, allowing you to allegedly get the Galatron, which is a lot of fun. You'll get new megastructures, the Matter Decompressor, the Mega Art Installation, and the Strategic Coordination Center. The Matter Decompressor gives you minerals, the Mega Art Installation is all about amenities and unity, and the Strategic Coordination Center will improve your fleet supply, your naval capacity, and your ship's speed, alongside allowing you to have more defense platforms. You'll also get access to new Ascension perks on top of that, the Slave Market, how fun, and 4 new tracks. It should be base game, but even then, for $20, there is a lot of content in here. First Contact massively improves pre-FTLs and primitive civilizations in the game. They get a host of new events, and the interaction options for you as a player are massively increased. There are 3 narrative origins included in this: Broken Shackles, Payback, and Fear of the Dark, that all have fantastic storylines. Payback and Broken Shackles are basically set in the same universe as well, so you can play those with a friend and go and competitively, or cooperatively I should say, take on Minimar's specialized industries. You'll also get cloaking technology with this DLC. For only $15, I think this one's really good. I honestly think First Contact, in terms of the features and content included in here, is much larger than a DLC like Apocalypse or Astral Planes. This should probably be closer to the $20 mark if we're comparing it to other DLC prices. At $15, I think it's a steal though. The main downside to First Contact is that if you don't care about pre-FTLs and primitives, or you don't want to play the Origins, there's basically nothing in this DLC except the cloaking. And I would not recommend you buy First Contact just for cloaking technology, for God's sake. You don't want to roleplay as the Klingons or the Romulans that much. Welcome to the S tier. Honestly, I think to enjoy a full and complete game of Stellaris, you need every item in the S tier. These are, in my opinion, the most important DLC. Whilst you don't have to buy them all at once, if you don't have them, it will be noticeable in the long run. You're missing out on some core gameplay, to be quite honest. There are 3 Ascension Path DLC in this S tier. First off, we have Biogenesis, the Biological Ascension Path DLC. Not only does this give you access to Bio Ascension Paths that can either become Clone, Purity, or Mutation, they are a lot of fun and very necessary for power scaling in the mid-game to be able to take on late-game threats. You also get access to a brand new ship type, the Biological ships, which in terms of power are just straight up better in the late game than regular mechanical ships. If you use these bio ships, you'll then also be able to take a new player crisis path based on Fury, allowing you to breed giants behind you and fight them together. There are 3 new Origins and 6 new Civics that will increase replayability of Stellaris. There's also the Hive Fallen Empire, which is uniquely very different to the other normal Fallen Empires in the game. You'll also get access to Deep Space Citadels. These are a defensive megastructure, basically a giant weapons platform you can plop down in space. And 16 new species portraits. So this is also a species pack rolled in as well. There are 65 new events, new music, new diplomatic rooms, and city sets. And can you tell there's a lot in here? It is pretty jam-packed. It isn't the biggest DLC we've got though. That'll be coming up in just a moment. Shadows of the Shroud unlocks the Psionic Ascension path, allowing you to explore the Shroud, which is a bit like the Warp from Warhammer 40,000. In there you'll find special entities you can make pacts and deals and covenants with. You'll also get access to a host of new weapons, some of the best weapons in the damn game. And the end of the cycle, which is a cataclysm of cataclysmic proportions, and new Origins and new Civics. The only thing really included in this DLC is psionic related stuff, or anti-psionic stuff, the Mind Warden's Origin or Mind Warden's Enclave that want to destroy psionics everywhere, and I think that's why it's only priced at $20. I would honestly argue that there is even less in this one, because if you don't go for that Psionic Ascension path, you're basically using nothing in here. Realistically, I think this should probably be priced at around $15, though I'm not in charge of Paradox's price models, and if I was, I'm sure the shareholders would be very, very unhappy. And won't somebody please think of the poor shareholders, honestly. Machine Age is the biggest DLC in the history of Stellaris. This is probably my recommended first purchase if you want to pick up a DLC. If you don't have any of them and you want to expand your gameplay, Machine Age is the place to go. This will unlock both the cybernetic and synthetic ascension paths, allowing you to bind with machines either a little bit or completely. You'll also be able to play as individualistic machine empires, or if you're playing as a Gestalt machine empire, you get access to the modularity, virtuality, or nanotech ascension paths for those. There are 3 new origins: Synthetic Fertility, Cybernetic Creed, and Arc Welders. Synth Fertility and Cybernetic Creed are both a lot of fun. There is a lot of theme there, a lot of story, and on top of that, they're really strong. There are 6 new civics, 2 new kilo structures, arc furnaces, and Dyson swarms. Honestly, they're super powerful and very necessary now after the economic reckoning of 4.3. There is a brand new endgame crisis, Satana included in this, a brand new player crisis path, Cosmogenesis, that is really, really strong, allowing you to first off get access to Fallen Empire buildings and technologies, and then later on try to exit the universe and create your own new one. This is the best DLC that Paradox have ever released ever, and I absolutely love it. Granted, there are some issues with certain bits of content in this. For example, the player crisis has a few broken mechanics, and by broken I don't mean they're super strong, I mean they don't work. The synaptic lathe from the trailer literally is both badly balanced and also doesn't always seem to work properly. The last 2 DLC in the S tier are going to enhance your playthrough experience by giving you more variety. Distant Stars gives you a host of brand new encounters in terms of anomalies, lots of brand new events and event chains. You'll also get access to the L cluster outside of your galaxy, and on top of that, some Leviathans are also locked behind this DLC. Distant Stars should probably just be included in the base game. I've been saying that a lot, but I really think this one is really useful to add depth to your playthrough, so you're not constantly coming up against the same events and the same anomalies. Yes, if you play for long enough like me, you will get to that point where you just run into the same things over and over and over, but at least with Distant Stars, if you've kind of got to a point where the game is stale, you can make it new and fresh all over again. Ancient Relics gives you access to dig sites. Here you can do archaeological digs, which are basically like Astral Rifts, except they come in a DLC that is only $10, thus half the price. On top of that, you'll get access to new precursor civilizations, you'll get a bunch of relics to use special decisions with them, new music, minor artifacts, and on top of that, if all of that wasn't enough, you'll find Relic Worlds, ancient worlds that are damaged and ruined that used to be a Cumenopolis city world, possibly like Trantor after the Empire fell in Foundation, and they can not only be explored, there might be dig sites there might be event chains, but they can be restored into a Cumenopolis world if you have the Megacorp DLC. Ancient Relics is a lot of fun, there's a lot of theme here, and a lot of narrative content. At only $10 or $5 right now while it's on sale, I don't see how you could say no. I'm now going to dive through a couple of recommended bundles that I think may be good combinations if you want to listen. So first off, we have the new starter bundle that I think will be really good while the game is on sale at the moment. If you're looking to spend under $50 on a fun gameplay experience, I recommend you get the base game on sale right now for $10. Then with your remaining $40, you pick up Machine Age for $15, Megacorp for another $10, Ancient Relics for $5, and Galactic Paragons for $7.50, giving you another $2.50 in the kitty. You could slightly go over budget and pick up one of these species packs for another $5, bringing it up to $52.50, but only grab one of those if they really take your fancy. Overall, this is going to give you access to not just all of the endgame crisis factions for the late game, but also most of the Ascension paths. You've got Cybernetic and Synthetic and Synth Age if you're going to play as Gestalt Machine Empire. You'll have access to the dig site, so you can do a lot of fun narrative bits around that. You'll have Relic Worlds and a Cumenopolis world, giving you access to basically every planet type in the game, including, we'll still have access to the Ring World from Utopia, because Utopia is now base game. And with Galactic Paragons included in that, we'll get access to our Destiny traits and all of the leader leveling bonuses. Plus, you'll be able to play with your Empire Council to decide who's on that. There's a lot of fun to be had here. I think that's a good starting point for the game. If you already have those items and you're now looking to pick up more to expand your gameplay experience, then I'd recommend your expansion grouping here. So, probably pick up either Biogenesis or Shadows of the Shroud, depending on which of those you're more interested in, Psionic or Biological Ascension. If you don't pick up Biogenesis, if you pick up Shadows of the Shroud, you'll have a little bit of extra money in the kitty, which I would recommend you push towards something like Nemesis, so you're still going to get access to one of the player crisis packs. But assuming you picked up Biogenesis and everything that contains, I then probably grab Federation, so I get access to the Federation mechanics, First Contact, Distant Stars, so I get pre-FTL plus new events. I probably at this point would want some new events, and Grand Archive to get access to the specimens and all of the flavor that comes along with that. That bundle, Biogenesis, Federation, First Contact, Grand Archive, and Distant Stars, would set you back about $51.50 while the sale is on at the moment, and you'd be getting a brand new set of Ascension paths, a player crisis path, a host of new thematic mechanics, and a bunch of new events and flavor in the background to just flesh out your Stellaris playthrough experiences. If you do want to go down the Psionic path, I'd still recommend Distant Stars and Grand Archive, but then instead of First Contact, I'd probably try and swap out Nemesis so we get access still to a player crisis like I mentioned before, but keep in Federations. Altogether, Shadows of the Shroud, Distant Stars, Grand Archive, Federations, and Nemesis would be, again, about $50. I hope you found this information and some of my recommendations useful. Don't forget, if you want to go and buy any DLC or Stellaris Season 2 or anything from the Paradox Interactive Store where you can get your Steam keys, you can use our link down in the description below, or go to the Paradox Interactive Store and use the code MONTUPLAYS at the checkout to also help to support this channel. If you've enjoyed this video, but it hasn't quite scratched that Stellaris itch, you might want to find out more about the brand new Stellaris Nomads DLC and Willpower DLC that will be coming later on this year. To find out more information about those, click the video on screen now.
Okay, let's go for the other ones first. Sanguine Sweeper. Okay, let's Firewind. Let's try this out.
Have we made things too convenient for ourselves? It sounds like a dumb question, but the user-friendly, experience-optimized, child-safe, seamless, frictionless, forgiving, and intuitive world we have built around ourselves may genuinely be undermining our ability to learn basic concepts, take basic responsibility, and even hold down a basic job. Multiple studies on different areas ranging from personal finance to career skills down to basic critical thinking have highlighted this trend, and unfortunately, it only seems to be getting worse. Modern technology has undoubtedly made our lives more
людей.
Так, это я тоже посмотрел. Интересно. Touchnose.
Used to be on the job is now in the building, and somewhat vice versa. Also, those origins that push you into an early ascension have been given particular attention with the objective of pushing this ascension later into the game. Overall ascensions are now going to be completed much later than previously. That's partly because the ascension situation takes about 3 times as long now to complete for each of the ascension paths. The devs would like to thank everyone who has helped them throughout the open beta process. While there are some things that they didn't get into 4.3.0, the devs are going to continue working on them for the future, whether that be in a post 4.3 patch or instead in 4.4, 4.5 or beyond. 4.3.0 Cetus includes massive rebalancing of the ships, of the economy, and significant work on performance. There has been some work on stability, but the game director is saying that the devs have not hit the target that he wanted them to hit, so it will remain one of the primary focuses of the Custodian team. That is the time allocated to the programmers for the free patch for the future. Overall, the devs have hit the point where the game director believes it's time to bring the changes to live servers. Iteration and polish will continue, but ladies and gentlemen, this is what you've got for 4.3's release. So these patch notes are very, very long. When printed out in total, this would come to 24 A4 pages. That is 33% longer than 3.1 Lem, which I believe, I could be wrong on this, but I believe that was the longest patch notes the devs ever released, making 4.3, at least in terms of patch notes, the biggest patch ever. So here we go into these patch notes. The start is a little bit of a preamble. We've had some preamble, yes, but this is more preamble that's got more detail for us. So the 4.3.0 Cetus update focuses on economic balance and performance. Internally, I believe they've called this one the Reckoning. Significant changes have been made to the economy to rebalance it at a generally lower power level, with fewer bonuses or modifiers that stack non-linearly to extreme levels. Some traits, buildings, or district specializations may have changed or even been removed. Certain challenges that have been trivialized over the years may be much stronger, especially roaming space fauna, crises, and fallen empires. Navies have received major changes intended to reduce total ship count, making each ship individually more valuable and the devs feel more interesting. Ship defenses have been improved, especially for the larger hull sizes, that is your cruisers, battleships, and titans, so combats may last even longer than they previously did. Be aware that the perdition beams on titans now deal collateral damage to nearby ships. Yes, you heard that correctly, they have an AoE effect. Behind the scenes, the Custodian program has focused heavily on performance and stability. This means the game should go significantly faster and be more stable from the very start until the very end. There is one more note saying thank you from the game director for playing Stellaris, and an additional thanks to the many players that have helped the devs and provided feedback during the Cetus open beta. And talking about game performance, specifically looking into lag, this graph shows the benchmark test the devs ran. This was in a previous dev diary, but I just want to show it off. As you can see from the data here, we are getting much faster speeds in 4.3 even than 3.14. So this is a phenomenal boost to our speed. The graph you're looking at now has game date on the bottom axis, and on the left-hand side axis, the y-axis, we've got seconds per year. 4.3 is so much quicker than even 3.14 that until year 2070, the game is faster in 4.3 at any point than it was in 3.14. That is amazing. And then looking at late game, we're no longer getting a linear increase in seconds per year. In the late game, this is probably due to the fleet power and economies being smaller, meaning that we don't have as many ships being simulated, we don't have as many pops being simulated. Some of the changes that have been brought in, I think, are now starting to bear fruit, because we are getting constant, at least in this test, constant seconds per year from about 2400. Yes, there's a bit of noise in the data here, but constant, no change, no increase in lag time in the late game. That is an amazing achievement. Yes, okay, the game is much slower by 2400 than it was at 2200, granted, but if you compare it to 3.14 at 2400, the time, the lag was going up and up and up. It was not slowing down. Okay, there's that weird little artifact right at the end where we get a drop, but overall, that is an upward trajectory, pretty linear looking, whereas 4.3 appears to have achieved some form of goddamn stability, and this is amazing. I'm not saying lag is dead, but I mean, look at the graph, people. So how have they achieved this impossible feat of impossibility? Let's dive in. What are the improvements to start with? So, this is a big one. The devs have added the possibility to hot join while other players are hot joining. This is insane. This no longer means if you're running a larger multiplayer game, you'll have to cajole all the hot joining players to press the right button at the same time so you can process them simultaneously. Instead, whilst some players are hot joining, you can accept some more hot joiners, and more, and more. This would be amazing. I hope it works. I don't know if it does work. There's massive issues with multiplayer stability at the moment compared to 3.14 and other patches that look really good, but yeah, if this works, wow. The devs have added refugee attraction mechanics. This has refactored how refugees are calculated. They are now more likely to flee to countries ruled by their own species if available, and they will pick planets in a smarter manner. The game has now got refugee attraction. Civics like Free Haven will make more refugees show up, while allowing slavery will reduce the likelihood that people will seek refuge in your empire. Also, some of the Become the Crisis perks, specifically Cosmogenesis, they massively decrease the amount of refugees you're going to pick up. After a review of unemployment mechanics, the devs felt that they did not add significantly to the game. All unemployed pops now demote to civilian or maintenance drones at the end of the month. Boom. This is a massive boost for regular biological empires and non-Gestalt machines. They removed the rising unemployment event chain. Now, they say they've done that. In the 4.3 open beta that I've tested, I swear I've seen this a few times still, so maybe it's still leaking around somewhere. Not sure. Living standards have been adjusted. All living standards now include information for slaves, just in case you are a crazy player that finds some crazy way of getting slaves onto unusual and unexpected standards like utopian abundance. Happiness penalties on lower living standards also now apply to civilians as well. They've removed the demotion time bonuses as they are no longer relevant. Resettlement costs are now the same across all of your strata. Since promotion is now immediate at the end of the month, this prevents an undesired element of micromanagement where you would want to fire any pops you wanted to resettle. This is a massive boost, making things easier. What I really like there is being able to use shift or control shift to move 500, 1,000, many orders of magnitude more in terms of pops than we currently can. The developers have also improved grammar for French, German, and Spanish translation of empire names for certain randomized empires. They have reverted the materialist empire being forced to use cybernetic portraits if you own the machine age. Didn't notice that was happening, but okay, that does make sense. They've renamed the mercantile and unyielding traditions to commerce and fortification to match the naming structure of all other traditions. Job automation is now moved from district to planet. This means that technician automation will apply to all technician jobs on the planet instead of only jobs granted from the generated district. This is a massive boost, by the way. This makes it very, very easy to understand what's going to happen. Field modulation, eco-stimulation, and geothermal fracking technologies are now marked as gateway technologies for rural district specialization. Improvements to the Scorch World Herald civics now mention that diplomacy with other thermophiles is, in fact, possible. I thought it already was, but it's good that they now mention that. The option text for rogue servitors discovering alien life is now tonally appropriate. Apparently it was not quite thematic enough. The first robot timeline event has been blocked for machine species. That makes a lot of sense. And when multiple endgame crises are active in galaxy settings, endgame crises are now allowed to spawn 25 years after another crisis has spawned instead of being blocked while there is an active crisis. This makes it much more difficult. The economic and military reworks have already made all crises really hard, especially, let's say, 25 times all crisis. Adding in the fact that the endgame crises will now spawn regardless of if there is currently an active crisis, so you can't let a little pocket of the contingency survive, tech up for 10, 20, 30 years, rebuild your fleets, and then kill them to bring in the next crisis. This is going to be a lot tougher for those massive challenge runs. Now we've got the meat and potatoes for the ship and fleet rebalancing. Ship capacity usage has changed significantly. Corvettes are now 5 naval capacity, frigates are 8, destroyers 10, cruisers 20, and battleships 40. You'll notice this basically follows the old progression, except that frigates are a little bit of a weird place now. Everything's multiplied by 5, except frigates are 5 plus 3. This means you can then, of course, get, in place of 4 destroyers, 5 frigates. But frigates are now more expensive in terms of naval capacity than corvettes. Titans and Bio-Titans are 80, Juggernauts and Colossus weapons are 100. Then we've got the Bioships, Maulers are 4, then 6, then 8, depending on which stage of growth they're in. Weavers are 8, 12, then 16.
What the fuck?
Harbingers are 16, 24, and 32. And Stingers are 32, 48, and 64. This means the Bioships, I think, are at something of an advantage here in terms of nav cap, but we'll have to see how that plays out when the patch has fully been played through. Most ships, including Space Fauna and Event ships, in general have 5 times the naval capacity usage that they used to. Nanite Swarmer ships are now size 1. That is a massive debuff to Nanite Ascended Empire. Previously, Nanite Swarmers were size 0, so you could stack an infinite number of them and they required nothing. This means they're now going to be more expensive. I wonder if Nanite Swarmers have no upkeep still, because if they do, then being size 1 just means that it will affect you if you have any regular ships that aren't Nanite Swarmers. I suppose if that is how it's implemented, this is just going to push you into using Nanite Swarmers with no upkeep, because, you know, plus 1000% upkeep on 0 upkeep is still going to be 0. They've increased the base and modified Vivarium capacity to work with these new numbers, and Galactic Nemesis marauding ships have 20% less nav cap usage than their size would normally require. So that's 4 for corvettes, 8 for destroyers, and 16 for cruisers. They've increased the base naval capacity to 50, meaning you can field 10 corvettes before hitting your limit. They've also rebalanced the naval capacity text. In my playthroughs, I've noticed that the late-game repeatable nav cap techs don't seem to have been rebalanced. They're still just plus 20. Maybe that's an oversight, or maybe late-game naval capacity is not meant to increase very much. The Titan-class weapons now deal area of effect damage if they successfully hit their target. This is crazy. Perdition beams now deal damage to enemy ships within a certain range of the target. Ion cannons deal less collateral damage at a shorter range than Titan Perdition beams, and they've added ion cannon collateral damage to Starfire cannons. Okay, this means that you could run a fleet of, let's say, 10 Titans with Titan Lances, and due to the area of effect damage, you will actually stand a chance against corvettes, or at least that's, I think, the intention with this. Yes, area of effect damage isn't that high, but it's enough to take out annoying meat shield-like corvettes, where they would normally just take one shot from the Perdition beam, die, but you've done over damage there by, 1,000, 2,000%, and wasted most of the output of the Perdition beam. Armor and shielding have also been rebalanced. Now, higher tiers will also add a small amount of armor or shield hardening as appropriate. These tiers grant 1% armor or shield hardening per tier. So that means that you're at tier 5 armor, you're going to be getting 5% armor hardening. I assume on large components, medium and small, it's the same, because you don't really get a choice here. This does mean late game, you don't need as much armor hardening as you used to need. You just need lots of components. And on something like a Juggernaut or a Titan, on a Juggernaut, Juggernaut's what I'm thinking of, where you've got so many shield and armor component slots, you probably don't need to add any additional hardening. You'll already have enough stacked up. Higher tier ship and component costs and upkeep have generally been increased. So larger ships, more powerful ships, are going to cost you more, especially their components. They've increased the cost to build larger and higher tier ship sections and ship components. This includes the Fallen Empire ships from Cosmogenesis. Yeah, one of those battleships, battle cruisers now, fully tooled out, you're looking at around 10,000 alloys. That is equivalent to one stage of a megastructure. So you can have a megastructure, or you can have 4 battle cruisers. I think the megastructure costs need to be rebalanced in line with the massive changes to ship costs. Otherwise, it seems like a no-brainer that you're going to spend your alloys first on, say, a Dyson Sphere for 4,000 energy, rather than, you know, 4 battle cruisers or, what it would be, 8 battleships. It does seem a little bit of a no-brainer, maybe. Crystal hull plating now also grants flat damage reduction. This, I think, gives crystal plating a niche again. It previously had a niche for some time, a long time ago actually, when disruptors reigned supreme, bypass weaponry reigned supreme, and you could get enough hull from crystal plating to actually counter that. Now, though, it seems to have come back. So, crystal infused plating will give you -1, -2, and -3 damage per incoming shot for small, medium, and large sections. And it gives you some additional hull points, but I think the damage reduction here is what's going to be most powerful. Crystal forge plating giving you -2, -3, and -4 damage. Given the maximum damage output of a Corvette weapon is somewhere in the region of 40 or 50 per shot, I think, this means a Titan could easily stack up, you know, 6 of these things, get a reduction of around 25 or 30 damage per shot, basically negating most of the damage output from a Corvette. Combine in the new area of effect weaponry on a Perdition beam, and actually, I think this makes Titans an anti-Corvette ship, which kind of blows my mind, but yeah, there you go, amazing. They've increased the power usage of torpedoes and energy torpedoes on standard ships. Frigates are now faster and sturdier, moving at destroyer speed instead of cruiser speed. They have +1 utility and an auxiliary slot. They also use destroyer-sized reactors. The base hull for ships has been adjusted as well, so that means it's gone up. The multiplicative damage bonus for torpedoes and torpedo-like weapons gains has been reduced to 20% of their former values because ship sizes are 5 times larger. This is basically a programming shorthand here. The torpedo weaponry was entirely tied to the naval capacity usage of the ship it was firing at, or the fleet cap usage, I should say, which initially, if you ignore bioships, is the same. Because those fleet cap usage numbers have gone up from, for example, for a Corvette 1 to 5, gone up by a factor of 5, this means that reducing multiplicative damage bonus to just 20% of previously keeps it all the same. It's the same. Torpedoes have not changed, is what the boilerplate should read here. The maximum bonus has also been increased. This means that you'll get even bigger bonuses if you're fighting a Titan or a Juggernaut or Satana. Yes! They've increased the Federation and GDF fleet sizes to match the new system. Yeah, I've noticed Federation fleets now are very, very important. I have found it in the 4.3 open beta relatively easy to get to a few thousand naval capacity for my Empire. Pushing above that has been more challenging at present than previously. I'd need a lot more planets, pushing my Empire size up massively. Getting a Federation up and running to even medium fleet contributions is another 2,000 naval capacity worth of ships, and the same again for the GDF fleet. This means if you want to fight the Crisis, I think it's really important to have a Federation, not just for those anti-Crisis bonuses, but also for the 2,000 additional naval capacity. That is basically 1/5 of your total maximum naval capacity limit. So in essence here, they've gone from being, what was it, 4% of your total naval capacity limit, in essence 4 to 8%, up to 20 to 30% apiece. That is a massive, massive overhaul, making Fed and GDF fleets, as I said, much stronger. They've increased the bonus from Galactic Mobilization to match the new system as well. They've added nanite upkeep for nanotech ships. Okay, they've nerfed nano stuff into the ground. Oh god. So they have 1 fleet capacity, and they have a nanite upkeep, meaning you can't just run an infinite number of them. Oof. Wow, yeah, nanite needed nerfing, did it? No. Space Fauna now have 10% armor and shield hardening per rarity tier for each level above common. Okay, interesting. So, you know, at the epic, that's 40% armor and shield hardening. Yeah, I like that. I like that change. That's fun. The Crisis changes, what are they? Well, they have reduced the power of the Pretherin, Contingency, Extra Dimensional, Great Khan, Diadochi. Diadochi? What is the Diadochi Crisis? The Diadochi, isn't that the successor states of the Great Khan? What crisis did they have? What? Excuse me while I go and Google that. Okay, I've not really been able to find anything. I'm assuming what this means is that after the Great Khan dies,
Okay, that's
the Empire
fine.
splits off into the Diadochi. The Diadochi nations are just more powerful now because they were kind of sucky before. That's what I'm assuming. Anyway, the Tempest and the Desanu fleets have all been reduced by approximately a third in power. Okay, that's something. They've reduced the power of the Awakened Fallen Empire and Satana's fleets roughly by half. Wow, okay. Yeah, I must admit, I was fighting on a 2x crisis. I had a total of around, I think it was like 7,000 naval capacity, including my Fed fleet and GDF fleets. And I was struggling against a 2x crisis and an Awakened Fallen Empire. The combination together were a little touch and go, for sure. Also, they've reduced the difficulty based on
Nice
scale on the
ether.
Grey Tempest and the Khan. So even if you're on Grand Admiral, Grey Tempest and Khan won't be massively out of your reach. Roaming Tempest fleets may not always have a mothership on lower difficulties, though the garrison fleets are remaining unchanged. We should also note that since power per player has decreased by a larger percentage, these will make the crisis a much greater challenge than pre 4.3. Yeah, that's definitely true, you know? I think a 5x crisis 100 years early these days is going to be really hard. You know, I think that's going to be a really difficult challenge to try and pull off without some zany meta builds. They've increased many sources of command limit and naval capacity. So Galactic Force Projection, War Games in Supremacy, and Better Glandular Stimulation in Behemoth Fury Crisis perk now grant command limit multipliers instead of flat values. Generally, that is good, but it's better later in the game. Early on, it's kind of worse because you're getting a bonus. It's additively added up, these multipliers, but still, you're getting a bonus based on what you currently have. Later on, as you've gained other sources of command limit, flat sources that then are getting multiplied by these multipliers, it's better than it used to be in terms of the raw numbers. Am I making sense? I hope so. The devs have reduced the fleet power, the minimum fleet power necessary to trigger the fight with the ambushing Cuthaloid down to 600. It will be a tough fight and you might lose some ships, but you usually win. 600 fleet power is around the full naval capacity, I would say, somewhere in the region of the starting corvettes, getting say 10 of them to have a full 50. That's around 600 now. The torpedo combat computers and bio combat computers, or Fawn and Neuro chips, have been renamed to siege combat computers and also add plus 50%, plus 65%, plus 80%, and plus 100% damage versus star bases and bombardment damage. No bioships use siege combat computers, as Mauler Mandibles already do a fine job of eating star bases. This is very interesting. So this basically means that if you want to get through a platform, you want to use these siege combat computers and torpedo combat computers. That's going to help you overall. First off, torpedo is going to be better versus star bases straight up, but then getting a bonus damage included in that is cool. The Dimensional Fleet Astral Action has been adjusted to reduce general fleet sizes. This will summon a number of escorts equal to the number of Astral Rifts you've explored and cruisers equal to half that number rounded down, basically making the Dimensional Fleet, which is kind of a mid-game ability at best, utterly worthless. I don't think I would ever even use this anymore. Bubbles and all of the misnamed variants no longer use naval capacity. The reason for this is that if it used naval capacity, if she used naval capacity, when Bubbles reached the ripe old age of 100 and grew in size, you then suddenly have to choose between killing off Bubbles, probably not what you want to do, that would be evil, or disbanding a bunch of fleets because Bubbles is taking up the naval capacity equivalent of, say, 20 corvettes or more, and that would be really, really bad. Anchorages now give plus 5 nav cap, plus 3 with Naval Logistics Office, so that's a total of
yeah, that's completely useless.
Office as well. and they have trade upkeep equal to the naval capacity upkeep that
Max
they are
combat.
providing. Again, this is going to be quite a lot less. So in order to get one battleship, you will need to have 8 anchorages just for one battleship. Honestly, that's wild. That's not even possible on a fully
Physical.
upgraded starbase. With Naval Logistics Office and 6 anchorages, you can get to 42, which just squeaks through to one battleship, but that does require the Naval Logistics Office. Soldiers are now specialists, they're no longer workers, and they also have 1 alloy upkeep per 100 pops. This doesn't sound like much, right? But in order to get large numbers of fleets, we now need many more soldiers than previously if you want to be facing a 5 times, or dare I say it, even a 10 times crisis, which is now very strong. And this means you're going to be spending probably at least, 400, 500, 600 alloys a month in the mid-game, up to thousands later on in the late game, just paying for your soldier upkeep jobs. This is going to be a massive sink of alloys, where we already are getting fewer alloys produced thanks to the economic nerfs from patch overall, contributing to the lower fleet sizes you're going to see in 4.3 games. Let's now look at the economic rebalancing. So, many sources of Unity production have been reduced. That should mean it is slower to get your traditions done. They've increased the base Unity production of all empires from 5 up to 10. Many traits reducing housing have been rebalanced a bit. Colonies designations now universally add job efficiency to their appropriate jobs rather than increasing the output or reducing upkeep. This is a massive boost for research on all of your research worlds, because efficiency means you'll get plus 10% extra jobs, that's 10% more output, yes, at the cost of 10% more goods spent on it. You'll need more consumer goods for that extra 10% research. It is worse for the basic resource outputs, because you're getting, 10% instead of the 25% for technicians, miners, and farmers, so that's much worse. And because it's not an increase to output from jobs, this stacks less well. So actually, overall, this is a big reduction. Many sources of empire size modifiers have been reduced. The base amount of empire size generated by pops has been halved. This is especially things that reduce empire size down to 0. So basically, it is pretty much impossible now to get empire size to 0. Oh, that's what the devs think. Anyway, we'll find out. The base amount of empire size generated by colonies has been doubled from 10 up to 20. That means 3 colonies is giving you 60 empire size. So wide empires have been heavily impacted by this. This now means tall empires with lots of pops and few planets will have a lot less empire size than they did in previous patches. And wider empires, especially early in the game, if you colonize too many planets too quickly, your empire size will quickly spiral out of control and give you massive increases to tech and tradition costs with very little economic benefit. So I think we will see a reduced pace for colonization and the spread of colonies in the early and mid game if you want to keep your empire size down. Effects and modifiers that granted jobs per pop have been replaced with static job numbers. This is an economic hit to some of the planet-based modifiers that usually granted these things. They have reduced most job-based sources of research, but in exchange for this, they've reduced tech costs by half. This indirectly has massively improved space-based deposits, which at the moment are basically worthless in 4.2 and previously, like +5 science from a couple of deposits. So what? I can get that with 100 pops. Now, not so much. This is because we're getting reductions to the specialist building that increases your engineering, physics, and society. Instead, now the maximum level only adds plus 0.5. And on top of that, the research capital thing, the building, has gone down to just plus 0.5, I believe, for each type of research. So overall, research outputs are much lower, but yes, tech costs are lower too. So you don't, I think, feel this as much Your actual income number feels lower, but your output isn't that bad, okay? I promise. The developers have also improved mineral deposits on asteroids and energy deposits on many stars, meaning that those values are more impactful now. Many buildings and modifiers that increase job output have been reduced. For example, the technologies for energy, minerals, and food that used to grant plus 20% output are now just plus 5%. It is a massive nerf to our economy. Most stability bonuses have been reduced to 1/2 to 1/3 of their previous values. The intention of this change is to make stability generally more important and harder to pin at 100, and also make things like +1 or +2 stability more valuable. Most job efficiency modifiers have been reduced, so you're getting less job efficiency. This is the reckoning, the economic reckoning, don't forget. Some production modifiers had been turned into job efficiency modifiers. Across the board, I've generally found where you used to get job production, often that's now job efficiency. And because efficiency and job output stack multiplicatively with each other, this has reduced your net output and increased your upkeep costs. Also, ascension situations progress much slower than they previously did. It's now going to take you quite a bit longer to biologically ascend, synthetically ascend, cybernetically ascend, psionically ascend, because the actual situation will take 15, 20, or 30 years at least to get it done. This means that getting your empire fully ascended by year 30 or year 20, as you could previously do in 4.2, is, I think, pretty much impossible. You're probably looking at year 40 to 70 in terms of finished ascension tasks at this point, which pushes back the bonuses you get from ascending much later in the game, giving an early game nerf to power. The only exception for these ascension situations is the Endbringers. Tick-tock goes the clock, and yes, the end of the cycle is still coming. More strategic resource production has been moved to the strategic resource producing district specialization, significantly reducing the amount given for free by strategic resource deposits without the specialization. You're normally now, I think, plus 0.15 per 100 pops, unless you specialize. If you specialize, you lose output of, let's say, minerals or food, but you're gaining even more of the rare resources. I don't think this is still that impactful. You can still get plenty of rare resources from the synthetic refineries built alongside industrial districts, so yeah, I don't think this is actually going to hurt you that much. Special planetary deposits are also 4 times more common now. The devs have made some unique planetary features more interesting. Not entirely sure what that means, but I like interesting, so I'm in favor of this. Subsidy edicts have been nerfed into the goddamn ground. For example, capacity subsidies used to grant plus 50% resource output from technicians. It's now granting plus 20% job efficiency, and it will increase your trade upkeep rather than energy upkeep by 0.5 per 100 pops. That is a big hit. Basically, as you can see, across the board, numbers are going to be lower. It is not going to be as easy to get a big economy. You can't just do it really quickly. We've now got some juicy changes all about automation building. So, assembly patterns and construction templates are now tier 2 and tier 4 technology. Automation buildings are now job specific and no longer increase their upkeep based on district count. Automated worker or simple drone jobs increase their upkeep by 4 energy per 100 jobs that they're doing. Specialist and complex drones are 8 energy, and elite jobs, if you can automate those, are 12 energy per 100 jobs. Fallen Empire buildings are now a planet limit of 1, and they automate 25% or 50% of relevant specialist jobs, or 75% or 100% of relevant worker jobs. This means the Fallen Empire buildings can basically fully automate your basic resource production and get you a good section of the way there with alloy jobs or researcher jobs or unity jobs, that sort of thing. There are some exceptions here. The Dimensional Replicator produces 10 of each strategic resource, and the upgraded Dimensional Fabricator produces 25 of each and 5 of each rare resource. That's nanites, dark matter, Zro, and living metal. The Sky Dome and Imperium Dome and the Shrink Space Depot and Extra Dimensional Depot are functionally the same. They still provide you with what they did before, which is housing and amenities or additional resource storage space. The devs have also adjusted the costs, upkeep, and build times of all of the Fallen Empire buildings. Fallen Empires gain 100% automated workforce efficiency. That's very strong. That basically means the 50% automated jobs they've got on specialists and the 100% on workers are now at plus 100% automation efficiency, so they count as 2 pops each. And then when they awaken, they get a bonus of plus 500% additional automated workforce efficiency for a total then of plus 600% or 700% net automated workforce efficiency. So every 1 job is 7 jobs. Wow. Polytechnic mentors have been nerfed into the ground. They now grant minors engineering research rather than Unity, and the bonuses they grant have been reduced to plus 0.1. It was a brief, amazing time while it lasted when you basically could play a mineral rush to be a Unity rush to Ascension rush to just kind of win. But yes, those days are behind us. They've also retooled some of the bonuses the ethics give. So authoritarian ethics no longer increase worker production bonus. Instead, they increase worker job efficiency. Egalitarians have a reduced faction production bonus of plus 15% / plus 30% now, and the specialist production bonus has been converted to specialist job efficiency. The last change to ethics is pacifism, and they have now a reduced empire size from Pop's bonus of only -10 and -20% for regular and fanatic. This is actually a bigger nerf than you'd think for 2 reasons. First off, the amounts that Pops are adding to your empire size has been halved, and on top of that, you're also getting less of a reduction here from pacifism. So this is really not so great. The corporate authority now has +1 envoy instead of +1 external leader pool. I think that makes a lot of sense. There's also been some player crisis rebalancing. They've adjusted crisis currency gains across the board. Cosmogenesis and Behemoth crises should be quite a bit slower to progress than before. Nemesis will be slower to progress passively through vassal control, but much faster through direct destruction. Crisis perks that give economic bonuses now also give slight upkeep increases where appropriate. For example, in Cosmogenesis, you get a monthly output to engineering, society, physics research at each level. Depending on which level it is, it's a different science type. That also comes...
Not so months ago, just 11 days ago. Sure. 8 days ago. Nada. Okay, sure. Сид Eileen Astra. Did you want? I don't care if you figured it out already. Yeah, by the way, probably what I can do quickly
Send someone's peepers on us, Trucky.
without any not too much problems. Let's just get the last one. Probably not worth it really. But you know. $4,000. Let's get like that. %96% crit rate. Not enough crit damage. Yeah, it seems much better. Crit damage increased by 50%. %, crit rate. Seems much more adequate. Pen ratio. Maybe like that is better. No clue. Oh, that's HP Pro. Okay. So this thing. Just wait a bit and see. If that is any better. Right, what was it this one? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Okay. No, it's not necessarily better. But how much? 1, 2, 3, 4. Ah, actually, it still can be better. Because it's 1, 2, 3. Come on, go into crit rate. And it went into anomaly proficiency. Yeah, okay. Happens. Happens to the best of us. Whatever. Seems reasonable. Also is reasonable. Maybe this is a bit better. 77%. Yeah. Okay, sure.
Number 0, Andy. But maybe instead of this, I still should use her. Ooh, we really harmonized. Is the concert starting?
Convenient. But that isn't necessarily the problem just by itself. And while it's easy and honestly a little bit funny to point out the kids these days with their iPads and their 6-7s, this by itself is really not that different from what every generation has said about every other generation that came after them since the Industrial Revolution. Not many of you watching would know how to use a city directory to plan out an unknown route, because almost all of us have a perfectly up-to-date GPS sitting in our pocket at all times. There is arguably no real difference between that and people from the early 1900s not knowing how to start a fire with sticks. In both cases, modern technology had just made those skills irrelevant. So then, what's the difference today? Well, that's what researchers are trying to figure out, because, well, there really is something different today. And there are some theories that are each worth understanding. But there is also the problem of what these tools are actually trying to achieve. Does Facebook actually want you making real connections? Do dating apps want you to find healthy, compatible relationships? Try now, pay later, making informed financial decisions? Call sheet, understanding statistics? Robinhood, beating the market? Or, well, yeah, even YouTube, giving you the content you were looking for rather than the entertainment they mindlessly serve you. In a fight between easier and better, it does feel like the market is overwhelmingly favoring easier. And then, of course, above all of these today, there are AI tools that almost certainly have the ability to augment and enhance real thinking and productivity, but are almost universally being sold as a cost-effective way to just replace it. The tools that we have used to make our lives easier have become exponentially more complex, while the tasks they are enabling have become extremely simple by design. So on top of all of this, we should probably also ask ourselves what happens if we pass down a world that future generations are too dumb to maintain.
Literally tens of millions of kids who may never catch up. And so this has to be, for me, it's like a national emergency.
I'm working, I'm trying to get it back so that we can have this beautiful, look at that angle.
We've also been trying to push forward these kinds of financial markets for years, but it never happened. How did you make this work?
Right now, you need various accounts to trade across all of these markets.
There's a continued downturn that accelerated during the pandemic with little signs of slowing down.
Now, here's some key takeaways that I found in this study. 72% of teens say that they often or sometimes feel peaceful when they're phoned less.
When you use Apple Pay, that's real money. That's true American dollars.
Okay, so before we get into exactly how we are conveniencing ourselves into being big dum-dums, we should probably address whether this is even real, or just the same intergenerational bickering that has existed forever. Because, well, for most of modern history, it really has just been a baseless complaint. Every single generation since the Industrial Revolution has looked at the next one and decided that they were softer, lazier, and less capable. And every time, they have been largely wrong. Through the entirety of the 20th century, measured intelligence across the developed world actually rose by about 3 IQ points per decade in what psychologists call the Flynn effect. Sure, we stopped learning how to run a printing press, but we built computers that gave us access to an almost infinite library of knowledge, and we got smarter in the fields that counted. This trend had been seen in pretty much every country that had industrialized, until very recently. Since about the mid-2000s, researchers in Norway, Denmark, Finland, the UK, France, Germany, and the Netherlands have all reported the Flynn effect either stalling or reversing. Here in America, the National Assessment of Educational Progress has shown the biggest decline in reading since 1990 and the first ever score drops in mathematics for school-age students. And the most recent OECD PISA results showed math performance across the developed world falling at a rate that had never been measured before. So, for the first time in the history of actually measuring this stuff, generations really have started getting a little bit dumber over time. And some generations are getting dumber much faster than others. Now, the immediate reaction to this trend is to blame the screens or the kids, but we aren't just getting dumber generation to generation. As time goes on, even older people who weren't raised on a diet of cocoa melons and skibbity toilets have also developed a case of the stupid. This becomes especially fascinating, albeit a little scary, when you consider the environmental factors we are not dealing with today, like leaded gasoline and whatever passed for painkillers back in the day. So there is a little bit more going on here, and there is no silver bullet. There are, however, multiple headwinds that should at least be considered in parallel. The first is that a lot of the modern technology that has been rewarded in the marketplace has not really expanded human capability. It has just removed friction, and removing friction very often removes the very thing that was making people capable in the first place. Take something as simple as balancing a checkbook. Almost nobody on this side of 40 has ever done it, and nobody is mourning that particular chore. But manually reconciling every transaction against a paper statement forced people to actually look at every dollar they had spent. Modern payment systems do the exact opposite of that, and they do it by design. Something like Buy Now, Pay Later is specifically engineered to separate a person as much as possible from their spending decisions because the whole business model is to reduce the friction of consumption. Now, we know this is not just a simple anecdote, because these companies use it as a selling point when they are trying to sign retailers up to work with their platform. So they really aren't even trying to hide it. Theoretically, you could export all of your transactions into an Excel sheet at the end of the month and do a proper review. But let's be honest, nobody, Maxing their Coachella weekend is actually doing that. Apparently, this is a thing. Anyway, there is a very good reason why ease has become more desirable to investors than capability. The tools we have built to make our lives easier have become extremely complicated and extremely expensive to produce, which means for them to pay for themselves, increasingly their audience has needed to become the product, rather than just the user of the tool. User-friendly and innocent-looking payments mean less thinking, more spending, and ultimately more revenue for the companies designing them. Facebook, TikTok, and yes, even YouTube are not really tools of social connection or entertainment. They are tools to harvest attention and are clearly working. And a lot of other modern tools have been designed to be user-friendly at the direct expense of versatility or practical application. Kids who have grown up with computers their whole lives often have less of a clue how to troubleshoot basic problems or even print a document, because the tablets they grew up on are designed to hide the plumbing behind a clean interface. Now, none of this is inherently a bad thing. Convenience is good, and we shouldn't be manufacturing difficulty just for the sake of it. But being able to simply figure things out, adapt when something doesn't work perfectly, and take basic responsibility for our own actions is a huge part of the value that humans currently bring to the workforce, the economy, and society in general. When every tool we interact with is designed to require less of us, it should not be a surprise that we end up having less to give. And the consequences of that have already started showing up across 3 distinct areas of the economy, each worse than the last. So it's time to learn how money works to find out what happens when we build a world too convenient to get out of. Speaking of convenience, the reason every app, every checkout page, and every subscription button feels suspiciously easy these days is not an accident. It's marketing psychology, and the people who study it know exactly which buttons in your brain to push. If you want to see how all of this gets made, the team at HubSpot put together a free guide called The Science of Marketing Psychology, and it breaks down the actual cognitive biases that companies use to get you to click, buy, and come back. It walks through stuff like anchoring, loss aversion, and the decoy effect, which is the reason why there's always a medium popcorn. Okay, so these incentives have been quietly rewarding the easier is better model for decades now, and the consequences are starting to show up in a few places we really can't afford them. And the first of those is in the workplace. Younger generations are, according to more or less every industry survey over the last 2 years, struggling at work. A survey from Intelligent.com last year found that 47% of managers cited a lack of initiative as a serious problem with recent hires, and nearly 4 in 10 employers said they now actively prefer older workers over recent grads, even after accounting for the expectation of higher salaries. Now again, every generation of managers in history has complained that their new hires are soft. But the specific nature of the complaint this time is different. These workers have spent their entire lives being coddled in their role of student and consumer, which meant every awkward decision was handled for them long before they ever had a first day on the job. Both of those roles have been aggressively re-engineered over the last 2 decades to remove every possible moment of ambiguity. Teachers grade on rubrics that are published in advance. Learning apps tell people exactly which button to press next. Dating apps remove the awkward human element of approaching someone in person. Food delivery apps remember your order. And investment apps round up your spare change and invest it on your behalf. Unironically, many consumers report feeling overwhelmed by the choice of what piece of content to watch on the preferred streaming service, so they just give up and go back to scrolling through content that is picked for them. And I mean, I personally want to sound superior to this point, but I have absolutely done this myself. Every single one of these improvements has quietly removed a moment where a person used to have to stop, figure something out, and decide for themselves. Then on day 1 of their actual job, somebody hands them a task with no rubric, no tutorial, no autoplay, and no obvious right answer, and asks them to go and figure it out, which feels like a character flaw, right up until you realize it's the exact behavior their entire upbringing rewarded. And the really awkward bit for employers is that being genuinely good at just figuring things out is genuinely one of the most valuable skills anybody can bring to any career. It is the exact thing managers have usually trusted humans over software to do. because software, by its nature, still struggles with a problem it hasn't seen before. Although, unfortunately, if the studies are to be believed, we are simultaneously getting worse at this while the claimers are getting better. But more on that later. Which brings us to the second problem, and it starts much earlier than anybody's first job. The iPad Kid meme has started being a measurable phenomenon. Across the developed world, there is a clear trend of declining, but more importantly, diverging test scores. The OECD's latest PISA results showed that math scores across its member countries fell by roughly 15 points between 2018 and 2022. That was the single largest consecutive drop since the test was first administered. Now, even though this did fit into a longer-term trend, the larger-than-average drop could have been written off as one-time effects of COVID teaching from home. But the concerning detail was that these test scores didn't fall evenly. The NAEP found that the top-performing students largely held their ground while the bottom-performing students fell off a cliff, suggesting that the convenience economy isn't dragging everybody down equally. It is dragging down the kids with the least ability to push back against it. The remote learning shakeup didn't affect all students equally either. For advanced and already disciplined students, it was largely fine. A quiet room and a laptop let them learn at their own pace without classroom distractions. For underperforming students, well, it gave them much easier access to Fortnite instead. User-friendly and highly engaging technology is generally hard to snap yourself out of, even for fully grown adults who should, in theory, have better self-control than a teenager. Actually removing these distractions takes either serious self-discipline or serious parental discipline. And for a lot of households, that second one is a luxury they simply cannot afford. A single parent working 2 jobs is not going to police screen time the same way a wealthier household can, when they can afford a stay-at-home parent, private tuition, or a school that has banned phones entirely. So the class gap compounds. Wealthier kids are more likely to end up in environments that still make them figure things out. Everybody else is more likely to end up in environments explicitly designed to never ask them to. And then on top of all of this,
pretty close.
we have AI, which is the third and probably the biggest of these compounding problems. In theory, large language models are a genuinely powerful learning tool. For a disciplined student or professional, they can explain a concept a dozen different ways, simulate tutoring, and take a lot of the drudgery out of real knowledge work. Sure, they like to make a lot of shit up on the fly, but so do regular human educators, and some models can be asked to provide sources and citations along the way. In practice, well, that's not really how most people have been using them. The Digital Education Council's 2024 survey found that 86% of university students now use generative AI in their studies, and separate research from Best Colleges found that more than half of them used it specifically to cheat an assignment or an exam. Teachers trying to catch this are fighting an arms race they are quietly losing, because the detection tools are themselves wrong enough to be effectively useless in a disciplinary setting, which has led to an entire cohort of students passing through school without ever doing the exact activity that used to build the figuring things out muscle in the first place. And the job market has gone through a mirror image of the same thing. Applicants use AI to fire off hundreds of customized resumes and cover letters a week. Employers respond by running their own AI filters over the resulting flood of applications, rejecting most of them before a human ever sees them. The end result is a hiring process where a machine is writing the application, another machine is reading it, and a real human is just getting a polite email saying, "We have decided to go in another direction." And while all of this is happening, AI is being sold to schools as a cost-effective way to replace teachers, and to companies as a cheap way to replace their junior workers who would, on a normal career path, have been the ones actually doing the work that teaches people how to figure things out. Every layer of the system that used to teach people how to think through an unfamiliar problem is being quietly removed, and sold back to us as progress. Now, there is an obvious fix to almost all of this. You could put friction back in. Harder curricula with no open book policies, phones out of school, real consequences for AI cheating, hiring processes that involve an actual human reading an actual piece of work from an actual candidate, financial products that actually make you look at what you are spending before you spend it, and programs that prioritize functionality over ease of use. Almost none of this is going to happen, and the reasons why are not mysterious. The market rewards the frictionless product, and any single business that tries to add friction back in loses instantly to a competitor that doesn't. Parents cannot win a technology war against companies with literal billions of dollars and teams of behavioral scientists engineered specifically to keep their kids engaged. Regulators who, to put it generously, are at least a generation older than the technology they are meant to regulate have no real framework for any of this.
but that there is a school system that's going to start making sure that first graders or even pre-Ks have A1 teaching, every year starting, that far down in the grades. And that's just that's a wonderful thing.
And budget cuts to public schools mean that every education system is leaning harder into AI, not less, because a chatbot that costs nothing will always win the line item fight against a human teacher that costs a salary. From the market's point of view, things are already working exactly as intended. And if you want further proof of that, go and watch this video next to find out how we are slowly becoming unemployable. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.
Keep focused. What you deserve. Target.
Their poison is my grace! Listen carefully. The tide of fate. Annihilation. To define.
I get you all wrapped up. Now who's the prey? He won't back down. You can't escape my gaze. Right on cue.
Soldiers! Fight by my side!
Support has hit this bullet. Will reach its mark. Adjusting for wind.
Down strategy. Engaging. Right on cue.
Okay, so I can really fuck up.
That's not the enemy. False alarm.
Ether vision activate.
The faithless are a blight upon this
I
world.
engaged in a little bit of post-date, as I sometimes do, as a treat. Some people say we don't build beautiful things anymore, and like, lol, we built this. This is a graph of infant mortality over the last 2,300 years, and I thought it would be received as what it is. You know, probably the most beautiful graph that exists. We spend almost all of our time zoomed into the problems of right now, which is, of course, what we should be doing. It's how we got this far. But it's also useful to spend a little time zoomed out to see when progress progress has been made and what we can learn from that. And there's also power in joy. There's power in hope. There's power in the reality of improvement. I think it's worth spending time looking at that, both because it's useful and because it's true. Like, the reason this graph is so beautiful is because of what it represents. Like, aesthetically, it's a mess. But all of the parents whose children aren't dead, all of the children who are playing games and laughing together who are not dead, beautiful. So I actually was somewhat surprised by some of the reactions I got to this graph when I posted this. Like, about half the replies just agreed that this was all very amazing and good to see. But it also seems like many people were just unwilling to let it go without reframing this graph inside of the desperation and the confusion of the, okay, sure, good graph, but anti-vaxxers are working to take it away. AI data centers are going to take it away. What about adult mortality? Which, for clarity, also dropped precipitously in that same period. Of course, in all of these takes, there's stuff I agree with. Like the USAID cuts, we cannot be numb to the brutality of the richest man in the world taking away aid from the poorest people in the world. I'll never forgive that. It's impossible. Like, the fact that that is a true sentence, you could say that and it's true, is the most monstrous thing I could imagine. And it looks like it's going to result in a world that actually will get worse from one year to the next. But we're not heading back to how it was in 1880 or even 1950. 150 years ago, an American hospital was a place you went to die, which is still true in some places, but less true in one place, because of the work of this community and the people at DFTBA.com and all of our bookstore partners. Happen to be wearing a DFTBA shirt right now. It is interesting to me that it is so hard to prove that something has gone right without immediately pointing out all of the things that are going wrong. And there are good reasons for this. Like, there are people who will use progress as a sedative. They'll say, like, look how far we've come, and what they mean is, please stop asking for more, settle down, we're done, we're good. But that's not what it says to me. It says the opposite. It says, ask for more. Like, progress is clearly possible. And I think there are ways that we right now continue to make progress. This is not a graph of things just naturally getting better. It's not like over the course of the last 150 years, diseases got less dangerous. This is a graph of millions of little things that were not all pointed specifically at this problem. They were pointed specifically at people who wanted better lives. It's a graph of sewage systems and vaccines and antibiotics and maternal care and food security and public health workers and parents and doctors and nurses and scientists and governments and charities and just people working hard to make their lives better for themselves and others. I see this graph with a trajectory that is not finished. It is not a graph that says everything is fine. It is a graph that says despair is not wisdom. And I think that it is sometimes easy to feel that when you are having despair publicly, online, that is a form of sophistication or of wisdom. It is certainly a safe thing to do in a world that doesn't reward you for having takes about how things can get better, and indeed have. Sometimes I feel like the ability to name all the broken things is the same thing as an understanding of the world, but it's not. Because the world is not just broken things. And I don't want to live in a mind where every piece of good news has to be immediately escorted out of the room by a committee of caveats. I don't live in that mind. I am aware of the caveats. I know about them because the world is very good at telling me about them. And I'm glad for that, because the caveats are how we know where we need to keep fighting. But I also...
Okay. A bit of a pause is what Okay, so recommendation. Use this one. Once again, select this one, but instead of those two, use
What kind of fun job have you got me into this time? Ooh, we really harmonize.
Mhm. Retreat. No persona. Retreat. No. Not once. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can't make her 100%.
Want to be able to look at a line representing billions and billions of children who got to keep being alive and say despair is not wisdom. And indeed, it is a weakness of our minds that it is so much easier to pay attention to threats than to successes. And that weakness is especially dangerous in an information landscape so committed to giving us whatever is easiest to pay attention. Like a tiny effect of maybe just 2 people in 100 choosing not to click on your video this week. A video that is about this very process. The very process that will keep that number getting closer to 0. Lots of people working hard to make life better for themselves and for others. But I scroll past that one because the next one is maybe something I feel like I need to know to protect myself from some potential future threat. 2 people in 100 do that, and you might think that that means that like 2% fewer people will see that video. But that's not what happens. The algorithm amplifies that effect, and so you end up with a video that gets viewed by around 1/3 of the number of people who see most vlog brothers videos. I think this is one of the most interesting and important things about living in the world right now. These algorithms do not amplify our wisdom. So people, if you haven't seen that video, it's the top link in the description. You can check it out because despair is not wisdom. And if we thought it was, there's a hospital in Sierra Leone that would not exist, and there are babies who would otherwise be dead. But they're not. They can be tickled. John, I'll see you on Tuesday.
Loyalty. Keep focused. It's time. Seal!
Fire! Forge the path I tread! Rising tide of destiny! Annihilation! To defy!
You're up. Call's not over yet. Resolve. Hello? This is the end for you. My soul is with you. Roger that. He won't back down. Shoot. What you deserve.
Okay.
Fight by my side!
It's time. This won't take long. A sound strategy. Seal! Wait! I'll back you. Loyalty. Off balance. You sure you want me?
Mm-hmm. Oh. Um. Uh. Mm. 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 Ugh. No.
Number 0, Ambi.
Okay, well, that was this thing.
Yes, in the midst of all this, the United States Congress is seriously considering a piece of legislation called the Hot Rotisserie Chicken Act. I was part of a Hot Rotisserie Chicken Act in college. But anyway, this started off as like a standalone bill, and now the House has added it as an amendment to this year's Farm Bill, which means it's probably gonna pass. And I guess I'm fine with that, though I do think the whole thing is a little silly. It'll help some people for sure, but It is little more than a publicity stunt for reasons that I will get to. There is a lot of important stuff we can learn about how government food assistance works by going deep on this silly bill with the silly name. So let's go ahead and do that. The biggest, but not the only way that we give food to poor people in the United States is through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. Some old-timers like me still call it food stamps, because back in the day, the government sent you these physical paper coupons that you could use to buy groceries. They looked like Monopoly money, and they came in like $1 or $5 or $10 denominations. You would take those to a store that accepted food stamps, which was a lot of them, but not all of them, and you used it like money, except that it was money that you could only spend on groceries. They gave you your change back in more food stamps, or if it was less than $1 in change, they would give you normal coins. If it sounds like a hassle for everyone involved, that's because it was. Stores basically had to be ready to accept two totally different kinds of currency at all times, and it was really visually obvious to all of the other people waiting in line that you were using food stamps, and it usually took extra time to pay with food stamps, which made everybody behind you in line mad. And everything got better in the early 2000s when we moved to a card-based system, EBT cards, electronic benefit transfer. You use them just like a credit card, and the government just fills it up for you every month. The typical monthly benefit is about $200 per person. Even if you are opposed to government social welfare benefits, you have to marvel at the efficiency of the SNAP system. Just as you have to marvel at the efficiency of Helix Sleep, sponsor of this video. Helix makes, even if you are philosophically opposed to social welfare benefits, you have to marvel at the efficiency of the SNAP model in the US. If you want to hand out food directly to the poor, you have to build a whole nationwide supply chain. We already have a nationwide supply chain. It's called grocery stores. And so it's much more efficient to just give poor people money to shop at grocery stores. But a complication arises when one considers that grocery stores don't just sell groceries. Grocery stores sell magazines and flower arrangements and cigarettes and little toys they dangle right at grabbing distance for a toddler who's riding in the shopping cart. And
This is really interesting. I should not forget about it tomorrow, but probably today is a bit too late. But yeah, this is this thing. Six days, 0 hours. Cute.
I'm really sorry.
Did everything I wanted, right? Yep. Have anyone sent me Ooh, 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 ooh. Yes, let's go. Was that a good idea? Nope. Looks like it wasn't. So I'm not gonna go do that right now. I'm gonna do that tomorrow. I think I did everything I wanted to do in the year, which is not much. And honestly, I'm not sure why I even bothered to start it. Like, I like the vibe of NTU so far, but okay, as you say. I want to send you to do that. I need to go collect.
So shiny.
depending on the state, some grocery stores sell alcohol. These are things that you might not want people to be able to buy with their food assistance, for reasons that are legitimate if debatable. So, since the very first federal food stamp program, which goes back to the Depression, there have been rules about what you can and cannot buy with your benefits. That very first national program, in 1939, was specifically limited to agricultural surplus. That is, the crops that U.S. farmers could not sell for some minimum price on the open market. This is why SNAP is, to this day, administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture instead of, like, the Department of Health and Human Services. Food benefits in the U.S. double as farm subsidies. Always have, by design, just in many different ways. There's this thing that still exists today called the USDA Commodity Foods Program that started out as a way for the government to buy surplus products like milk to stabilize the price for farmers. Use the government as the buyer of last resort. And the USDA would process and package these foods and send them out in bulk as a kind of supplement for people who are on food assistance. This is where we get the phrase government cheese. Colloquially, it refers to any and all government-provided benefits, but etymologically speaking, government cheese is literally a big block of processed cheese made by the government to subsidize the dairy industry. Many years ago, I made a YouTube video about a dessert called Blueberry Yum Yum, which is this unholy, big, bulk dessert where you layer whipped cream with cream cheese and graham crackers and blueberry pie filling. The video featured my old friend Chris, who is Hopi. He grew up on reservation. Indigenous communities are big recipients of commodity food products, and he told me that that dessert was the kind of thing his mom would make to use up all those big commodity blocks and jugs of stuff that they would get sent from the feds. Obesity and metabolic syndrome disproportionately afflict Native communities in the U.S., and people sometimes point to the Commodity Foods Program as one causal factor. Remember, it is a farm subsidy as much as it is a food program, and sometimes it makes more sense as a farm subsidy than it does as a food program. The Food Stamp Act of 1964 said that you could use your benefits to buy any food for human consumption except alcohol and imported foods. No imported foods. I suppose that was a bit of protectionism for farmers, effectively an import tariff doubling as a food benefit. And since the 1970s, the law has, in one way or another, specified that you cannot use your food stamps to buy hot, ready-to-eat food. The benefits are supposed to be for groceries, not for eating out, not for restaurant food. Why? Well, I think this is a policy that probably made a bit more sense in the 20th century, when people cooked at home more, and prepared foods were generally relatively more expensive than they are now. The prepared food industry is much more scaled up these days, driving down the unit costs. It's still probably cheaper to cook at home if you know what you're doing, but we live in the real world, where a lot of generational cooking knowledge has been lost, a lot of generational cooking habits have been lost, and poor people are often working multiple jobs outside the home, and they don't have time to cook. More than half of households with children receiving SNAP benefits are working households. Yes, some SNAP recipients are unemployed, but not all of them, not by a long shot. And a lot of the recipients who are unemployed are not working age. They're kids, or seniors, or other people who you wouldn't expect to be working, disabled people. Of the working people on SNAP, a lot of them are working multiple jobs, spending hours a day on the city bus because they can't afford a car, or they can't afford to live in a walkable community. and they live in a food desert where it's not profitable for supermarkets to operate, etc., etc. And you can imagine that a person living that kind of very common American life might need to rely, at least some of the time, on cheap prepared foods, cheap takeout, at least some of the time. But it was perhaps a different world in the 1970s, and Congress didn't want people using government food benefits for restaurant foods, which were considered a little more inherently luxurious back then. Now, forget for a second whether you agree with that policy. Just ask yourself, as a practical matter, where would you draw the line between prepared foods and groceries? Are cornflakes a prepared food? I mean, kinda. They are ready to eat. But cereal is a grocery, right? Why? How about a can of soup? It's prepared, but it's a grocery, isn't it? The common denominator is that they're not hot, at least not when you buy them. Restaurant food is usually served hot, to be consumed immediately, on site, or on the street, or as soon as you get home. Are there exceptions to this rule? Yes, absolutely. But probably the best, simplest way to draw a bright line, a bright legal line between groceries and prepared food is with temperature. So, if we look at the food stamp language from the 2008 Farm Bill, which is still in effect now, food that can be bought with your SNAP card is defined as
Mm-hmm. Man, whatever. Not this one, huh? Not this one. It's fine then.
any food or food product for home consumption except alcoholic beverages, tobacco, hot foods, or hot food products ready for immediate consumption other than those authorized pursuant to clauses yada yada yada. What clauses are we pursuing here? Well, there's a whole bunch of exceptions, mostly for old people, sick people, and homeless people. There are carve-outs that allow seniors to use their SNAP benefits to buy hot meals from federally authorized vendors, certain contractors, companies that run federally subsidized nursing homes. Again, a lot of these things are government subsidies to private sector entities that also incidentally function as food benefits for poor people. And even if you aren't covered by an exemption, there are all kinds of workarounds for this hot food ban. Convenience stores in poor neighborhoods often have a microwave on site where you can buy a cold burrito or a cold slice of pizza with your SNAP card, and then you can just turn around and heat it up yourself. And then there are the chickens. Grocery store rotisserie chicken. It's a very popular item in the United States. I think it may be the cheapest widely available source of ready-to-eat protein in our entire food system. Grocery stores often sell these birds at a loss, what they call a loss leader in business. They roast the birds in-house in these big, easy-to-use rotisserie cases. They fill the store with this big, delicious smell that brings in customers. The customer buys the chicken, which is very often a chicken from the fresh meat case that was about to expire anyway. And so this is a way for the store to minimize that loss. The customer buys the chicken, and they're probably not just going to have chicken for dinner. They're going to buy drinks and sides at a much better profit margin for the store. And retail is just like gambling in that the house always wins. Grocery stores that serve lots of SNAP recipients will often chill some of their chickens down so that they can be bought with EBT cards. And sometimes they'll even have a microwave right there for the customer to heat it back up again. Sure seems like a silly, pointless hoop to make everybody jump through, right? But then again, I would argue that if you want to draw a line between groceries and takeout, you will end up creating some gray zone that people will inevitably exploit. That doesn't mean the rule is ineffective. It just means that people are gonna bend it a little, and that's the cost of doing business. If you want to have speed limits, you have to accept that people will go 5 or 10 miles over that speed limit with impunity. You just factor that in when you're setting your speed limits. That doesn't mean we have to accept where prior generations of lawmakers have drawn the line between eligible and ineligible foods. Enter the Hot Rotisserie Chicken Act of 2026. This single-page bill simply inserts the words hot rotisserie chicken into the definition of eligible food products that we just read. That's literally all that it does. Hot rotisserie chicken is the only hot item that this bill covers. All other hot foods are still off limits to your typical able-bodied working-age SNAP user. The bill is sponsored by a bipartisan group of ostensibly centrist legislators, the most famous of whom is Senator John Fetterman from my home state of Pennsylvania. I've watched Pennsylvania politics my whole life, and so Fetterman's been on my radar since he was the mayor of Braddock. Wow, his career has taken some turns. We cannot know if his stroke changed his personality, but we do know that strokes sometimes do change people's personalities. Fetterman is thus quoted in his own press release, quote, "America's best and delicious affordability play is Costco's $4.99 rotisserie chicken. It's one of my family's favorites, and I'm proud to join this bill." That's a little weird, right? A U.S. senator plugging a specific company's brand? But it is true that the $5 Costco chicken is sui generis. I don't think anybody is selling a cheaper chicken on the national level. I got this one at the Food City for $8.99. And Costco is as close to a benevolent big box dictator as
Well, I gotta go to work tomorrow, so I guess